from the just concluded East African Procurement Forum that was held here in Kigali, Mr. John Karani is the chairman of the Council of the Kenya Institute of Supplies Management and a procurement and supply chain practitioner. And he joins me in studio now to talk a bit about the conference. Karibuni sana, John.
Asante sana.
Well, how was the conference and what were the key aspects shared throughout this two-day forum?
Well, thank you very much, Gloria, for having me here. It's a real privilege to be on Rwanda television station to talk about a topic that is very relevant right now in our day and time, because COVID has actually thrust procurement and supply chain into the epicenter of action, where procurement people have been called to become more responsive, more agile, more collaborative, more adaptive, to respond to this emergency situation, because everything revolves around supply chain. And that's really been the gist of how can we now better respond to these emerging emergencies, if there's such a word, but it's clearly going to be a new normal, as we have had. How can we be better prepared in future to become more responsive so that we are not caught flat-footed in future pandemics that may happen, because this could just be the beginning. And how can we prepare the mechanisms, the proper infrastructure, the proper platforms to become more responsive to our customers, to our users, to the government especially. So the theme really has been really around three key parameters: strengthening integrity and accountability in public procurement for an effective emergency response. So in that theme alone, there's so many aspects of it that tells you there's what they need to strengthen our response mechanism. There's a need to integrate what we call integrity, to actually engender integrity and accountability in public procurement, and make sure that we are more able to respond to the emergencies that will come in future, such as COVID-2019.
Absolutely. And throughout the years, there's been like a negative narrative around procurement and supply chains in Africa and even globally. Moving forward, what needs to be done for you to change this narrative as procurement professionals?
That's a very deep question, because it's something that has, I want to call it the negative narrative that has bedeviled the procurement and supply chain profession for the longest time. And much as it is true that there will always be one or two rotten apples in any profession, not just procurement, it is not true at all to say that procurement professionals are thieves. It is it's an unfortunate historical injustice, I call it, that we as procurement people have inherited, and which is something we need to do to change that perception. It will take time, but it will take also one professional at a time. And it's going to take each regional chapter, each country, doing the necessary sensitization, in entrenching the right culture of transparency, of accountability. And I want to say this because procurement is never a single person function. It's not just done by procurement professionals. It's a multifaceted role. It's done by users who may be engineers or maybe accountants. It's done by the people who actually generate the need. We as procurement people are really a piece of the cog, a facilitator in a wheel that's got many players. And unfortunately, we always end up bearing the brunt of the blame when things go wrong. When the truth is, there are so many players, right from the accounting officer that actually sign off the final order, to the people that actually sit in the tender committee, some of whom may not be procurement people. So I want to say this to say that we're not shifting the blame, but we want to make sure that everybody takes responsibility of the role they play in the supply chain wheel, so that we are not victimized, our members are not victimized and branded criminals even long before they are had. And that's something we are trying to do, especially within our own sphere of influence in Kenya, and I know it's happening across East Africa. How can we ensure that accountability, there's clear transparency of the process so that everybody is held accountable for the role they play in the supply chain wheel,
Certainly.
so that we are not victimized wrongly. as professionals.
Certainly a long way to go, but would you say that procurement laws across the region or policies are favorable, and what needs to be done better to improve service delivery?
Actually, right, I must say the laws that we have had so far have been good, but as always, the dynamism needed to be built into our laws, and I think that is also true, because laws should not be permanent fixtures. We should be constantly evolving them in line with the times that we are living in. And one of those laws that has been a little bit unfriendly to supply chain people is actually response to emergency procurement. It is like we never factored in that there will be emergencies. So the days, the lead times that were put into place to process orders were very lengthy, so that when COVID came, we were caught unawares because we did not have very clear-cut structures on how do we respond to an emergency situation without breaking the protocols, without being competitive, without keeping in place the clear principles of procurement, transparency, accountability, competitiveness, integrity. And that's how it happened that people took advantage of that gap to do orders almost retrospectively, which without bearing in mind the principles that underpin every procurement decision. And those are the things now that COVID has taught us. We need to put in place the proper mechanism to respond to future emergency situations.
John, very briefly before I let you go, what can East African countries learn from each other moving forward in terms of procurement?
So there's an absolute need for us, I keep saying this for the longest time, as East Africa, we've got such a rich base in terms of productivity. And I come from the School of Economics, where we say economics of comparative advantage. What can each country capitalize on? So you become the center of excellence. For instance, Rwanda can become the center of excellence for systems. Other countries can become the manufacturing hub. How can we leverage the collective scale, the collective genius of our region, so that we actually create local industries, so that we are not caught flat-footed by dependency on China? We have the raw materials. We have the skill power. Or we just need to invest in the capital equipment to become our own local production centers, and therefore eventually cut off the dependency syndrome that has unfortunately bedeviled us for too many years. We in East Africa, we as supply chain professionals can drive that agenda to become a self-dependent economics in this region. And that's what we should take forward.
Yeah, Mr. John Karani, thank you so much for sparing a moment of your time to speak to us this evening.
Thank you very much, Gloria. It's been a real pleasure to be here. Asante sana.
Asante.